The recording had no sound, and that was the first thing wrong with it. Counselor Veith of the Sarin Concordance had reviewed 10,000 execution broadcasts in her 400 years. Every species screamed. Every species begged or wept or went rigid with the particular silence that was itself a kind of scream. The audio track was the point of a broadcast execution. Fear was the message. But the human ambassador's feed had arrived stripped of sound, not censored, not corrupted, deliberately muted at the source. She played it again. The man stood in the Kesh tribunal chamber, wrists bound, and he was looking directly into the recording lens, not at his captors, at the lens, as if he knew exactly who would be watching and when. And he was smiling. Veith leaned toward her console. The smile was not defiance. She had seen defiance. It trembled at the edges. This was something else. The ambassador's lips moved once, forming a single word she could not hear, and then the Kesh executioner stepped into frame and the feed ended. She rewound. She isolated the mouth. She fed it to the linguistic engine and asked it to read the shape of that final word. The engine returned its answer, and Veith sat very still. The word was already. She summoned the timestamp. The broadcast had gone out across 17 systems 90 seconds ago, a triumphant Kesh proclamation of dominance over the newest, weakest species to stumble into contested space. 90 seconds, and the ambassador had said already, as though the response to his own death were something that had begun before the blade was raised. Veith was not a fearful creature. She had outlived 3 galactic wars by understanding that fear was information about the future, and information was survival. So she did the thing her instincts demanded and cross-referenced the human ambassador's arrival records against the Kesh capture logs. The numbers did not agree. According to the Kesh, they had seized Ambassador Elias Korin 11 days ago in a boarding action against a lightly armed diplomatic vessel. According to the arrival manifest logged at the neutral relay station, Elias Korin had disembarked, alone, unarmed, and walked calmly onto a Kesh vessel of his own accord 13 days ago. He had not been captured. He had boarded them. He had spent 2 days as their prisoner before the Kesh even filed him as one. "That's not possible," said her aide, a young analyst named Ordo, who had been reading over her shoulder in the way the young did when they had not yet learned the value of not knowing things. Why would a man walk onto the ship of a species that eats diplomacy for entertainment? "I don't know," Veith said. "Then he was tricked, Lord. He filed a flight plan." She turned the console so he could see it. Look at the fuel allocation. He carried exactly enough to reach the Kesh vessel, not enough to return. He never intended to come back. Ordo's crest flattened, a suicide then a gesture. But Veith was already looking at the third thing that did not fit, and it was worse than the first 2 combined. Because the Kesh broadcast had been triumphant, an announcement of a beginning, the first human they had taken, a warning to the rest. And yet 3 separate long-range listening posts spread across 100 light-years of empty space had logged an anomaly before the execution aired. Not after, before. Something in the dark between stars had changed its heading. She did not yet know what. She only knew that 11 days ago a single unarmed human had walked willingly into the jaws of a predator species, that 90 seconds ago he had died smiling and mouthing the word already, and that somewhere out in the void, something had begun to move toward the Kesh homeworld before the blade ever fell. "Veith," Ordo said quietly. "What did he mean, already what?" "That," she said, "is the only question that matters now." She would spend the next 40 days learning the answer, and by the end of it she would understand something about the human species that would keep the Concordance from ever, under any circumstance, going to war with them. But that understanding was still ahead of her, past a great deal of confusion and a great deal of fear, and it began with a man named Elias Korin, who was already dead, and who had planned it that way. The Kesh, to their credit, noticed nothing wrong for 6 days. Why would they? They were an apex species by every metric the galaxy respected. Their warships outmassed anything the humans could field by a factor of 40. Their reflexes were faster, their armor thicker, their history longer and bloodier. When the human colonies had first appeared on their border 8 years prior, the HFY had classified them the way one classifies weather: a nuisance, occasionally violent, fundamentally beneath concern. They had killed the ambassador as a formality, a punctuation mark on a sentence they believed they had already finished. So when the first Kesh outpost went dark, they assumed equipment failure. Veith learned this because the Concordance monitored Kesh military channels the way one keeps an eye on a large and unpredictable animal. She watched the outpost designated Threshold 9 drop off the network, watched the Kesh dispatch a repair tender rather than a warship, and understood immediately that they had made a mistake of category. They were treating an attack as an accident because they could not conceive of being attacked. "Who did it?" Ordo asked. "The human fleet is 9 days out from that position. We're tracking it. It hasn't moved." "I know." "Then it can't be humans." Veith said nothing, because she had noticed the detail the Kesh would not notice for another 2 days. Threshold 9 had not been destroyed. It had been silenced. Its reactors were intact. Its defensive batteries had never fired. Whatever had reached it had done so without triggering a single alarm and had chosen not to blow it apart. "They want the Kesh to send someone to look," she murmured. "Why?" "Because a corpse tells you nothing, but a mystery makes you send your people into it." She was right, though it would be a long time before she understood the full shape of why. The Kesh repair tender arrived at Threshold 9, and its crew of 12 reported the outpost empty. Not destroyed, empty. Every Kesh soldier gone. No blood, no bodies, no signs of struggle. The doors were open from the inside. And painted on the wall of the central chamber, in a substance the tender crew's instruments identified as human blood, were 4 words in flawless Kesh script. "He asked us to wait." The tender crew transmitted this discovery to their command, and then the tender itself went silent, and by the time a Kesh warship finally arrived at Threshold 9 2 days later, there was no tender, no crew, and no message on the wall. It had been cleaned. Perfectly, as though it had never been there at all. But the Concordance had the transmission. Veith watched it 40 times. "He asked us to wait." "Who is he?" Ordo demanded. "The ambassador. He's dead. We watched him die." "Yes," Veith said slowly. "We watched him die. Ordo, I want you to answer a question, and I want you to think before you do. Why would a species send a single unarmed man to die on a broadcast in front of the entire galaxy at the exact moment they began an attack that required no such man at all?" Ordo thought. To his credit, he thought for a long time. "I can't find a reason," he admitted. "Neither can I," said Veith, "and that frightens me more than the empty outpost." It was here, roughly, that the Concordance's analysts began making the first of the errors that would define their understanding of humanity. Errors so reasonable, so logically constructed, that Veith herself made most of them before she learned better. The first error was this: they assumed the human fleet 9 days out was the threat, and the disappearances were something else. A trick, special forces, a hidden weapon. They were watching the fist, and had not yet understood that humans do not lead with the fist. The Kesh, meanwhile, made an error of their own, and theirs was fatal. Enraged now, they escalated. They pulled a battle group from their core world's 40 warships, the pride of the High Fang, and sent it screaming toward the human colonies to end the nuisance permanently. A show of overwhelming force. Annihilation as answer. Veith tracked the battle group's departure, and felt the cold certainty of watching a creature walk toward a snare it could not see. "They're going to win," Ordo said, watching the same feed. 40 capital ships against a colonial defense fleet. The humans have, what, a dozen real warships. This is over. "Is it?" said Veith. The battle group reached the human system on the 11th day. The Concordance had a listening post close enough to receive the engagement in near real time. And Veith cleared her schedule to watch, because she had learned by now that she did not understand these creatures, and understanding was her entire purpose. What she saw did not make sense. The human colonial fleet did not form a defensive line. It did not retreat to the planet. It scattered 12 ships fleeing in 12 directions, apparent panic, apparent rout. The Kesh commander, a Fang Lord named Usarik, broadcast his contempt across open channels for the entire galaxy to hear, mocking the cowardice of the prey species that ran rather than face him. And the humans let him say it. They let him chase. They let him pursue their fleeing ships deep into the system, past the third planet, past the asteroid belt, into the region near the system star. "They're going to be slaughtered," Ordo whispered. They were not slaughtered. Because the humans had spent 8 years, 8 quiet years while the Kesh dismissed them as weather, seeding their own home system, with something the Concordance had no name for. Not weapons in the conventional sense. The humans had converted their asteroid belt into a debris field of unpowered, undetectable mass drivers, thousands of them, drifting cold and dark, indistinguishable from ordinary rock until the moment they woke. They did not need to aim. They needed only for the Kesh to be somewhere in the field, and the fleeing human ships had led them precisely, patiently, into the center of it. Veith watched 40 of the finest warships in Kesh history die in 90 seconds, torn apart by rocks moving at a fraction of light, and she understood the first true thing about humans. They were not fast, they were not strong, they were patient, and they were willing to spend 8 years preparing a trap they might never need, on the chance that one day someone would call them weather. But even this, she would later realize, she had understood wrongly. Fang Lord Usarik survived. His flagship, crippled, limped out of the debris field with its spine broken and its crew decimated, and Veith expected him to flee for home. Instead, he did something she found almost unbearably instructive. He broadcast a demand for parley. He had lost 40 ships and he wanted to talk. The human response came within the hour, on an open channel, and for the first time in this entire affair, Veith heard a living human voice. It belonged to a woman who identified herself as fleet coordinator on a raise, and it was not triumphant. It was tired. "Fang Lord Usarik," Raze said, "you broadcast the execution of our ambassador to 17 systems. Do you know what Elias was?" "A weakling," Usarik snarled, "a gesture, a dead man." "He was my brother-in-law," Raze said. "He was also the only person in this fleet who argued against what we did today. He said there had to be another way. He believed that right up until the moment your species proved there was, so he made a choice. He asked to go to you himself. Do you understand? He volunteered. He wanted to look you in the eyes and give you one last chance to be something other than what you are." Usarik was silent. "You executed him on a broadcast," Raze continued, "to show the galaxy how strong you are. And in doing so, you gave us the one thing we needed, a timestamp, a confirmation witnessed by 17 systems that diplomacy was dead and the fault was yours. Elias knew you, broadcast it. He knew your pride. He counted on it. His death wasn't the beginning of your war against us, Fang Lord." The channel hissed. It was the starting gun for hours. Veith felt something move down the length of her spine that she had not felt in 300 years. Because now she understood the word. Already, the ambassador had not been a victim. He had been a signal. His entire death was a message sent to his own people, its time, broadcast through the very network his killers controlled, using their vanity as the transmitter. He had smiled into that lens because he knew that his sister-in-law was watching, and that his smile was the last thing she needed to give the order. The humans had turned their own ambassador's execution into a communications relay. "That's monstrous," Ordo breathed. "Yes," Veith agreed, "and they consider it a mercy. Do you see it? They gave the Kesh every chance. They sent a man to die specifically to prove they'd tried everything else first, so that when they did this, she gestured at the debris field, the graveyard of 40 warships, they could tell themselves, and us, and history that they had no choice. She turned from the screen. They don't fight to win, Ordo. They fight to be right. And a species that needs to be right will pay any price the rightness demands. That is a far more dangerous thing than a species that merely wants to survive. And here Veith made her second great error, and it was the largest of them all, and it was this. She believed she now understood the humans. She believed the ambassador's death was the whole trick. The clever gambit, the layered plan, the trap 8 years in the making. She wrote her report to the Concordance High Table. She recommended caution, wary respect. The treatment one gives a small predator that has proven it can kill a large one. She believed the story was ending. The story was not ending. It was, in fact, only now beginning, and the piece that would reframe everything had been sitting in the Concordance's own archives the entire time, unnoticed, because no one had thought to look for it. It was Ordo who found it, and he found it by accident, and Veith would remember for the rest of her life the way his voice sounded when he called her back to the analysis chamber at the ship's night cycle, when he should have been resting. Veith, the listening posts, the anomaly, the thing that changed heading before the execution aired. We assumed it was a human ship, a relief force. It wasn't a ship. Ordo's hands were trembling over the console. I ran the mass signature. It's too small. It's a single object, roughly the size of a human, moving under its own power through hard vacuum without a vessel. And Veith, he swallowed. It's decelerating. It's been decelerating for 11 days. It's going to arrive at the Kesh homeworld in 9 hours. Veith stared at the mass signature, human-sized, alone in the void. Play me the timestamp again, she said. The exact moment it changed heading. Ordo played it. The object had begun its journey, its impossible, unshielded, months-long fall through open space toward the Kesh homeworld, 13 days ago. Not 11. Not the day of the execution. 13 days ago. The same day Ambassador Elias Corrin had disembarked at the neutral relay and walked, alone and unarmed, onto a Kesh vessel of his own accord. No, Veith whispered. Because the story she had constructed, the clever ambassador, the signal, the trap, was true. But it was the surface of the truth, and beneath it was something so much larger that she felt the floor of her understanding give way. Elias Corrin had not gone to the Kesh to die as a signal. He had gone to the Kesh to be carried inside their vessel to a position from which the object could be launched. His body, his capture, his execution, all of it was theater staged to move a single piece of cargo across a border that no human ship could cross undetected. The Kesh had searched him, of course. They had scanned him for weapons and found none, because he was not the weapon. He was the delivery mechanism. Veith, Ordo said, and his voice had gone very small. What did they launch? What is the object? She did not answer because she did not know, and because the not knowing had opened a pit beneath her that had no bottom. Everything she had understood was incomplete. Every error she had corrected had only revealed a larger error beneath it. She had thought the humans clever. She had thought they were fighting to be right. She was beginning to suspect they were fighting for something she did not have a word for at all. She had 9 hours. She spent them learning who Elias Corrin had been, because she had a growing conviction that the object falling toward the Kesh homeworld could not be understood without understanding the man. The Concordance's files on him were thin. He was 41 years old. He had a wife named Sona and a daughter named Myra who was 6. He had been, before he became an ambassador, a xenolinguist, a specialist in the translation of hostile languages, which explained the flawless Kesh script painted in blood on the wall of Threshold 9. He had written those words, or rather, he had taught them to whoever came after him. And there was one more thing in the file, a detail so small that 3 separate analysts had flagged it as irrelevant. In the recording of Elias Corrin disembarking at the neutral relay 13 days ago, walking calmly toward the Kesh vessel that would carry him to his death. He had not been entirely alone. He had been carrying something. The relay's cameras had logged it as personal effects. A small case, unremarkable, the kind a diplomat might carry. It had been scanned. It had contained, the scan reported, nothing but a child's drawing and a data slate. The Kesh had let him keep it. Why wouldn't they? A dying man's comfort. A last sentimental possession. They had even, Veith discovered by cross-referencing the execution footage frame by frame, allowed him to keep it right up until the end. In the final seconds of the broadcast, just before the executioner stepped into frame, Elias Koren had set the small case down on the floor of the tribunal chamber. Gently, the way one sets down something precious. And then he had smiled and said already and died. The case was still there. Veith was certain of it. Somewhere in the Kesh tribunal chamber, on the Kesh homeworld, a small, unremarkable case sat on the floor where a dead man had placed it, containing a child's drawing and a data slate, and no one had thought to move it, because it was the possession of a defeated, executed nuisance from a species that was beneath concern. The object in the void, she said aloud, and the case in the chamber, they're connected. How? Ordo asked. One is a weapon falling from space, the other is a dead man's keepsake. I don't know yet. She was staring at the child's drawing, which the Concordance's scan had captured. It showed, in the simple lines of a 6-year-old, 3 figures holding hands beneath a yellow sun. A man, a woman, a small child. And beneath them, in careful, painstaking letters, a single line that Myra Koren had written for her father to carry to his death. Come home, Daddy. Veith had lived 400 years and she did not weep, could not weep. Her species had no mechanism for it. But she understood, looking at that drawing, that she was in the presence of something she had catastrophically underestimated, and that the underestimation was not hers alone. It belonged to the Kesh, and to the Concordance, and to every species in the galaxy that had ever looked at humanity and seen weather. They had all made the same error. They had all assumed that a species so small, so fragile, so sentimental, a species that sent its diplomats to die carrying their children's drawings, could not possibly be dangerous. They had mistaken love for weakness. They were about to learn the difference. 6 hours before the object reached the Kesh homeworld, Fang Lord Usarik's crippled flagship reached it first, and Usarik went before the High Fang to explain how he had lost 40 warships to rocks, and the Concordance heard all of it, because the humans had left the Kesh command channels open on purpose. They wanted the galaxy to watch. Veith listened to Usarik's testimony. She listened to the High Fang's fury. And she listened, with a dread that had become physical, to the moment a Kesh technician interrupted the tribunal to report an anomaly on approach. A single small object, human-sized, decelerating hard, transmitting a repeating signal on an open frequency. Play the signal, the High Fang commanded. The technician played it. It was a voice. A human voice, recorded calm, and Veith recognized it because she had spent the last hours steeped in this man's life. It was Elias Koren, speaking from beyond his own death, and he was speaking in flawless Kesh. By the time you hear this, said the dead ambassador, I have been executed on your broadcast, and you have lost a fleet, and you are afraid, and you do not yet know why. I am going to tell you why. You believe you killed me. You did not. I asked you to. I walked onto your ship. I let you take me across your border because there was no other way to carry this close enough. You searched me for weapons and found none because I never carried one. I carried a message, and I carried a promise, and I carried my daughter's drawing, which is on the floor of the room where you killed me, and which I am asking you, one father to whatever you are, not to destroy. The tribunal chamber was silent. The Concordance chamber was silent. Veith realized she was gripping the edge of her console. The object approaching your world is not a bomb, Elias continued. I want you to understand that clearly because you are about to try to shoot it down, and I want you to know that it will not matter. It is not a weapon. It is a person. Veeth's crest went rigid. "Her name," said the dead man, "was Sona Koren. She was my wife. She volunteered for what your scientists will shortly confirm to be a one-way modification of a human body for unshielded transit through hard vacuum, a modification that cannot be reversed and that no human survives for longer than the duration of a single journey. She has been falling toward you for 13 days. She is still alive. She will remain alive for approximately 4 more hours, which is exactly long enough to reach your surface. And she is not carrying a weapon either." A pause. In the recording, Veeth could hear the man breathe. "She is carrying our daughter." The concordance chamber erupted. Ordo was on his feet. Veeth could not move. "They put a child in the void," Ordo was saying, over and over. "They sent a mother and a child through open space. They modified them. Why? To do what? What is the point? What does it accomplish?" "Be quiet," Veeth said. "Listen." Because the recording was still playing, and Elias Koren was not finished. And the last thing he said was the thing that reorganized Veeth's entire understanding of the universe. "You are asking yourselves what this accomplishes," said the dead man, as though he had heard Ordo across all the light years and all the days. "You are looking for the strategy, the weapon, the trick. I will save you the effort. There is no weapon. There is no strategy that requires this. My fleet has already destroyed yours. We could have stopped there. We chose not to, and I need you to understand why, because it is the only thing that will keep your species alive." Asarik in the tribunal had gone the ashen color of a predator that has finally understood it is prey. "When you killed me," Elias said, "you thought you were sending a message to my people. We are stronger, submit or die. You did not understand us, so you assumed we would respond as you would, with calculation, with self-preservation, with the arithmetic of survival. But we are not doing arithmetic. My wife is falling toward your world with our daughter in her arms not because it is useful. It accomplishes nothing your fleet did not already accomplish. She is doing it because we need you to see, the whole galaxy needs to see, that there is no threat you can make that will stop us. You cannot deter a species that will send a father and a mother and a child, one after another, into certain death to prove a point. You cannot win a war of endurance against people who are willing to spend the things you would never spend. We are not stronger than you, Fang Lord. We are simply unwilling to stop, and we will demonstrate that unwillingness in whatever currency it costs, until you understand that the only way to be safe from us is to never, ever make us begin." The recording clicked off. And then, in the terrible silence of the Kesh tribunal, a technician spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "The object, it's transmitting again, a different signal. It's a child. She's asking for her father." Veeth would spend the rest of her long life trying to describe what happened in the next 4 hours, and she would never fully succeed, because language was built by species that stopped, and this was a story about a species that did not. The Kesh did not shoot down the object. Asarik, broken, gave the order to hold fire, and no one countermanded him, because every soldier on that world had heard the recording, and every soldier had understood the thing Veeth had understood. That to fire would be to prove the dead man right, to become the villain in a story the entire galaxy was now watching, and that the humans had engineered a situation in which the Kesh could not win. If they killed the child, they were monsters, and humanity's rage would be righteous and total and endless. If they let her land, they surrendered the one thing an apex predator cannot survive without, the belief of every other species that it was too strong to challenge. The humans had not defeated the Kesh fleet. They had defeated the Kesh legend, and they had done it by spending a family. The object entered the atmosphere. It slowed. And in the final minutes the Kesh Veeth watched this and did not believe it. The Kesh sent up a recovery craft, not to destroy, to catch. Fang Lord Asarik himself, disgraced, dying inside from wounds both physical and otherwise, gave the order to save the human child. Because it was the only move left on a board, where every other move was a loss. They caught her. Sona Koren was already dead when they reached her. The modification had done what her husband promised it would do, but she had held her daughter through 13 days of falling dark, had shielded her with a body engineered to endure exactly one impossible journey. And Myra Corrin, 6 years old, alive, uncomprehending, asking for her father, was pulled from her mother's frozen arms by the claws of the species that had started all of this by deciding humans were weather. The Kesh did not know what to do with her. That, more than anything, was their defeat. An apex predator, 40 warships dead, its legend in ruins, holding a human child it did not dare to harm and could not bring itself to comfort, while 17 systems watched and understood all at once that the old rules were gone. Veith met Fleet Coordinator Anna Reyes 11 days later when the Concordance brokered the return of the child. She had insisted on being present. She needed to look at one of them in person. Reyes was smaller than she expected, tired around the eyes in a way that Veith now recognized as the permanent condition of her species. They stood together in a neutral station observation deck, watching a Kesh vessel, carry Myra Corrin home under a flag of truce that no one had asked the humans to accept. "You spent them," Veith said finally. "Your ambassador, his wife. You nearly spent the child for a point." "Yes," Reyes said. "I do not understand your species." "I know." Reyes watched the vessel. Elias understood the Kesh better than they understood themselves. He knew they'd read strength as the only language worth speaking, so he gave them a demonstration of strength in a language they'd never heard. Not the strength to destroy, the strength to lose on purpose again and again until the other side breaks. "He was your family." "He was my brother." Reyes' voice did not change, and that was the most frightening thing about it. "Sona was my sister. Myra is my niece, and she's the only one of the three coming home, and she's going to grow up knowing exactly what her parents chose and exactly why, and someday she's going to have to decide whether it was worth it. That's the cost. We don't pretend there isn't one. We just decided a long time ago that there are things worse than paying it." Veith was silent for a long moment. "There will be other species," she said, "stronger than the Kesh. They will hear this story and they will not believe it, and they will test you as the Kesh tested you. I know. And you will do this again." Reyes turned and looked at her, and Veith saw in the small, tired eyes of that fragile creature the thing that no scan could measure and no fleet could deter. The thing that Elias Corrin had fallen through the dark to teach a galaxy that had mistaken love for weakness. "We'll do it as many times as it takes," Anna Reyes said. "That's the whole secret, counselor. There isn't a clever trick underneath it. There's just this. Everyone else has a point where the cost gets too high and they stop. We looked for hours a long time ago." She turned back to the window to the vessel carrying the child home. "We never found it." Veith filed her final report to the high table that night. It was 1 line long, because after 40 days she had learned that the shortest true things are the ones that keep you alive. She wrote, "Do not measure them by what they can destroy. Measure them by what they are willing to lose, and understand that we have never, in 400 years, met the bottom of it." Then she sat alone in the dark of her chamber and thought about a child's drawing on the floor of a tribunal room 100 light years away. 3 figures holding hands beneath a yellow sun, and the words a 6-year-old had sent with her father into the mouth of the thing that killed him. "Come home, Daddy." He had not come home. Neither had her mother. And somewhere on a human world that child was being taught to read and to write and to understand the exact weight of what had been spent to carry her back across the dark. So that one day, when the next apex species looked at humanity and saw only something small and soft and easily broken, there would be someone left who knew, all the way down to the marrow, that the galaxy had it backwards. The strong ones were not the ones who could not be hurt. They were the ones who had already decided, long ago in the quiet of their own hearts, that there was no amount of hurt that would ever make them stop. And out in the black between the stars, 13 days from anywhere, another human ship was already moving, because somewhere someone had made them begin.